She was brought to the palace for one reason: to give the king an heir. Her womb was pledged to the crown before her heart ever had a say. A virgin with emerald eyes and beauty like a curse, she was the kingdom's most precious secret. But what no one knew, not even the cold-hearted King Edward, was that this silent girl carried shadows in her soul. Shadows darker than the royal walls had ever seen. She came not just to bear a child, but with a secret that could shake the throne. And when the truth was revealed, even the blood in the king's veins turned to ice. She wasn't who they thought she was. She wasn't ordinary. She was danger wrapped in silk, a storm disguised as a servant. But while Edward was a ruthless king feared across the empire, he made one mistake. He let her near his heart. Now the palace will tremble. Love will turn to war. And a king who never bowed to emotion will fall, because her secret isn't just deadly. It's royal. The desert was quiet under the night sky. The moon was full. Its light spread across the sand like a silver blanket. The wind was soft, cold, sad. A royal tent stood alone among the dunes. Tall, elegant, still, its dark green fabric fluttered gently. 2 guards stood outside, alert, silent, watching. Inside the tent, King Edward sat alone. He was 32, young, strong, and handsome. But his eyes were tired. His heart was heavy. A small lantern lit the space. Its soft glow touched his face. He looked down at his hands. They were steady, but his soul was not. He had come here for peace. Far from his kingdom. Far from his queen. She didn't love him anymore. She didn't even look at him. And worse, he had no child. No heir. No future. His court had begged him to take other women. Try again. Take many. One will give you a son. But Edward had said no. He didn't want many women. He wanted one heart, one soul, one love. Now he was here, in the middle of a foreign land, trying to breathe, trying to feel something. Then it happened. A sharp sound outside. A cry. A crash. He stood quickly. He stepped outside the tent. One guard was down. The second was struggling. And then, a figure jumped from the shadows. The person was fully covered. Cloth wrapped around the body. Face hidden. Only eyes showed. Sharp. Bold. The attacker moved fast. A sword in hand. Coming straight for the king. But Edward was calm. He waited. Then, at the right moment, he grabbed the sword hand, twisted, pulled the blade free. With one push, the attacker fell. Sand flew. The figure hit the ground hard. The scarf loosened. The head covering slipped, and long hair spilled out onto the sand. Soft, dark, flowing like silk. Edward stared. It was a woman. She looked up at him. Her eyes were hazel, deep and wild. Her lips were full. Her skin glowed under the moonlight. Even in dust and shadows, she was beautiful. Too beautiful. She sat up, breathing hard. He pointed the sword at her, but his hands were not steady now. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said. Her voice was soft, low, feminine, brave. "Then why did you attack?" he asked. She looked into his eyes. "I needed food," she whispered. He frowned. "Food?" She nodded. "My father. He's nearby. He hasn't eaten in days. We were trying to cross the desert, but he collapsed. I had no choice." Edward didn't speak. He studied her. She was no killer, but there was fire in her, and pain. "I thought there would be food here," she said. "I only wanted to take enough to save him. I didn't know you were a king." He lowered the sword. His eyes still locked on hers. "Take me to him," he said. She looked surprised. "You will come?" "Yes," he answered. She stood slowly. He followed her across the sand. The moon lit their path. The wind danced with her hair. They didn't talk, but something hung in the air between them. After a while, they reached a hollow. There, on the cold sand, lay an old man. Thin, pale, still. His hands trembled. His face looked tired, dying. She ran to him. She whispered, kneeling. Edward watched her. Her hands were gentle, her eyes full of love. She had risked her life for this man. He took a small pouch from his belt. He handed it to her. She opened it. Dates, bread, a little salt. She fed her father carefully. He chewed slowly, weakly, but his breathing grew steady. Edward said nothing. He just watched her save a life. She turned to him. "We live here," she said softly, "in this land. My father works wherever he can. I'm his only daughter. We were traveling to find work, but we got lost. He got sick, and we had no food left." Edward listened. Her voice was strong. Her eyes did not cry. She was not weak. She was a storm in silence. "You'll come with me," he said. She looked at him. "What?" "To my camp," he added. "You and your father, you'll be safe, fed. You won't have to fight anymore." She looked unsure. But then, she nodded. They began walking back together, side by side. The night was still, but Edward felt something shift. Inside him. She didn't smile, but her gaze stayed on him. It was deep, warm, mysterious. She walked like someone who didn't fear kings, or swords, or fate, and Edward, for the first time in a long while, felt alive. The tent stood silent under the glowing moon. Its fabric swayed gently in the wind, as if breathing with the desert itself. King Edward parted the entrance and stepped inside. She followed quietly, her steps soft on the sand. Inside, the lantern still flickered, casting a warm golden hue across the space. Edward pointed toward a low seat. "You can rest here." She nodded once and sat down slowly. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her back was straight. Her eyes did not wander. Edward turned to a wooden chest near the corner. He pulled out a silver tray, laid with dried fruits, soft bread, and a clay jug of milk. He placed it gently in front of her. "Eat and get some for your father," he said softly. "It's not much, but it's clean and warm." She looked at the food for a moment. Then she took a small piece of bread. Her hands trembled just a little. She ate quietly, no sound, no rush. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes lowered. Edward didn't respond right away. He was watching her. Not with suspicion, but with curiosity. "Who are you?" he asked gently. She looked up. Their eyes met again. Deep hazel meeting icy blue. But she didn't answer his question. Not with words. She only looked at him. Long, still silent. There was no smile on her face. No softness. No fear. Just mystery. And strength. Edward felt something stir in his chest. It was strange and soft, like a breeze moving through an empty room. He had seen many women, but never someone like her. She was wild but calm, beautiful but unreadable, like the desert itself. She stood up slowly, placing the half-eaten bread back on the tray. "I should go," she said. Edward nodded, though his eyes followed her carefully. She walked to the tent's entrance, then stopped. She turned her face just slightly, enough for him to see her profile in the lantern light. Her expression remained unreadable. But her eyes, they lingered on his face, quietly. Then she stepped outside. Edward stood there, frozen in place. He moved toward the tent's entrance and looked out. She was walking away, alone. Her long robe moved with the wind. Her hair, unbound now, flowed down her back. The moonlight touched her steps. She didn't look back. Not once. He watched her until her figure began to fade into the darkness of the dunes. Farther, and farther, and then she was gone, swallowed by the night. Edward stood there for a long time. Only the cold breeze and the rustling fabric filled the silence now. He took a deep breath. Something heavy rested in his chest. He didn't know what it was. Regret? Longing? Curiosity? Maybe all of them. He turned and sat back down on his seat. The tent felt different now. Warmer, colder. He wasn't sure. Tomorrow morning he would return to the palace. Back to the world of rules and walls. Back to a throne and a queen. A queen who didn't love him anymore. Who barely spoke to him. Who no longer looked him in the eye. Because he had no child. Because they had no child. Because somewhere between silence and disappointment, love had died. He closed his eyes. But in that darkness, he didn't see the queen. He saw her. The girl with wild hair and desert eyes. A stranger. A mystery. A memory already too loud to ignore. The golden gates of the royal palace creaked open. King Edward returned after days in the desert. The moonlight cast a silver glow on the marble steps. His boots echoed against the stone floor as he entered the courtyard. At the entrance stood Queen Margaret, dressed in a long royal blue gown embroidered with gold. Her body glittered with heavy jewelry. Her neck was covered with shining rubies, and her fingers sparkled with emeralds. But her eyes were cold, colder than the night air. She looked at Edward with disgust. "So the great king returns," she said sharply. Edward didn't respond. His face was calm, his eyes tired. Margaret stepped forward, grabbed his hand tightly, and hissed, "Do you know what they say in other kingdoms now? They mock us. They say the king of Velendor has no heir, that he is a weak man, that his wife still sleeps alone." Edward slowly pulled his hand away. "Enough, Margaret." "No!" she shouted. "It is not enough. I have borne your insults for years. I gave you my youth, my beauty, and what did I get? Nothing. You think wearing a crown makes you a man? A crown without an heir is just a decoration. You're no king. You're just—" "Silence." Edward's voice cut through the air. The guards outside turned their heads but did not move. Margaret's chest rose and fell with rage, her eyes burning with humiliation. Edward closed his eyes for a moment, then turned and walked inside the palace. The high ceilings, the grand chandeliers, the smell of roses. It was all the same. But something in him had changed. He walked to his private chamber and rang a silver bell. A moment later, his trusted servant Thomas appeared and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty?" Edward looked out the window into the dark sky. "There was a girl in the desert," he said. "Find her, bring her here, tonight." Thomas's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." By the time the stars had shifted above the palace, the girl had been found. She stood now at the palace gates, wearing the same simple dress she had worn in the desert. A thin scarf was wrapped around her head, her dark hair falling gently over her shoulders. Her eyes were calm, unreadable. She looked at the palace with no fear, no excitement, just stillness. Her name was Aveline. She was led into the royal hall, where King Edward waited, standing in front of the golden throne. His crown sat beside him, untouched. His eyes met hers as she entered. For a moment, the entire hall felt silent. Even the flames in the torches seemed to still. He stepped forward slowly, every move careful, deliberate. "I have no time for poetry," Edward said softly. "No time for games. So I will ask plainly." Aveline watched him with her unreadable eyes. "Will you marry me?" Edward asked. His voice did not tremble, but there was a strange vulnerability in it. "I have a queen, but I have no heir. I have a kingdom, but no peace. You, Aveline. There is something about you. Something that silences the chaos in me." Aveline looked at him for a long moment. Then a soft smile touched her lips. It was the first time he had seen her smile. She lowered her head gently and whispered, "Yes, Your Grace. I will." Edward took a deep breath, then slowly stepped closer. "But listen carefully," he said. "This marriage will be a secret. My court cannot know. Margaret cannot know. To the world you will not be my wife. You will be my guest, my companion, and in time, the mother of my child." Aveline looked up again, and this time, her eyes held something powerful, acceptance, strength, and a deep, silent storm. "I understand," she said. A private wedding was arranged that very night. Only 4 people attended: Edward, Aveline, Thomas, and the royal priest. No music was played. No candles were lit. The marriage took place in the small chapel behind the palace, lit only by moonlight. Edward wore a simple black robe, his crown absent. Aveline was dressed in white linen, the same dress she had worn when she had attacked his tent. She looked like a ghost from a dream, mysterious, soft, and unforgettable. The priest read the vows quietly. Edward looked into her eyes and said, "With no crowd to witness, I take you as my wife." Aveline's lips trembled slightly. "And I, you," she whispered. They sealed the vow with a gentle touch of hands. No kiss, no celebration. Just 2 souls bound in silence. Later that night, back in his chamber, Edward sat by the window, looking into the dark sky. He thought of the Queen's rage, of the lies he must now tell, of the future he had just risked. But when he turned his head and saw Aveline sitting quietly in her white gown on the couch across the room, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. She wasn't like anyone he had ever known. There was a secret inside her, something hidden behind her soft smile and silent eyes. And strangely, Edward didn't want to break that mystery. He just wanted her near. Tomorrow the court would see her and wonder. Tomorrow the queen would explode with anger. But tonight, in this stillness, the king had found a kind of warmth that even the golden halls of his palace had never offered. A crown without love was heavy, but a woman like Aveline, silent, strong, and beautiful, had the power to make even the heaviest crown feel lighter. And so the night faded, and the royal moon watched quietly over a secret marriage, born not out of duty, but from a desert storm and a wounded heart that had finally found something real. Edward turned to Aveline. She wore a long white gown, loose and flowing, the sleeves brushing against her wrists. Her hair was open, waves falling down her back. The fabric of the gown hugged her gently, but modestly. As she stood before him, her eyes lowered, she softly whispered, "Your Grace?" Edward turned to face her. His eyes paused at her face, her eyes, the way she held herself. Not like a queen, but like someone who had seen pain and knew how to carry it with pride.
"You may sit," he said quietly.
She nodded and moved toward the bed. He joined her. They sat side by side, saying nothing for a moment. The fire in the corner cracked softly. Edward spoke first. "I know this is not what you expected, to be married to a man like me." She turned her head gently. "I do not expect anything, Your Grace. Life rarely gives us what we expect." A soft smile touched his lips. "You speak wisely." She smiled too, but her eyes stayed calm, too calm. Edward reached out, touched her hand slowly. His fingers were warm. "I won't hurt you," he said gently. "And I won't take from you what you do not wish to give." She looked into his eyes for the first time. A soft, slow breath escaped her lips. "I am yours, Your Grace," she whispered. He leaned in slowly, touching her cheek with the back of his fingers. The warmth of his touch startled her, but she didn't pull away. Their lips met, softly, gently. No rush, no hunger, just quiet, slow closeness. His arms wrapped around her as he pulled her close. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the beat of his heart. Strong, steady, real. The night grew deeper. Later, as they lay together beneath the silk sheets, Aveline remained still. Her back touched his chest, his arm draped around her waist. His breath was warm against her neck. The king had fallen asleep. His breathing softened, deep and peaceful, but Aveline's eyes were open. Very slowly, she moved his arm away and sat up. She stood beside the bed, barefoot on the cold floor. The long white gown clung softly to her body, swaying gently as she moved. Her hair spilled over her shoulders like ink in water. She stood still for a long moment, watching him. The man who had taken her into his palace. The man who had married her in silence. The man who now slept beside her like she was someone he trusted. Foolish man. Her lips curved into a quiet, secret smile. She reached down to her leg, lifted the edge of her gown, and slowly pulled out a thin silver dagger strapped to her thigh. The metal glinted in the candlelight. She held it in her hand, its cold weight familiar. "I could kill him right now," she whispered softly to herself. She looked at him again. He had turned slightly in his sleep, his face toward the window now. Peaceful, almost innocent. "I was sent here for one reason," she whispered again. "To steal the secrets of this palace, and in the end, to end his life." Her eyes darkened. "I will not fail." She took a deep breath, then smiled slow, calm, mysterious. With the dagger still in her hand, she walked slowly toward the tall window. The curtains danced around her as she stepped between them and stared into the night. The moonlight fell on her face. Her white gown glowed softly in the pale light. Outside, the world slept. Inside she stood, half a bride, half a spy. Her eyes sparkled with secrets. And behind her, the king, her husband, slept. The night was deep, but morning would come. And with it, the beginning of a betrayal that would change everything. Next night, the palace celebrated the end of harvest season. There were lights and music everywhere, but Edward didn't join them. He found Aveline sitting alone in the moon garden. She wore a silver gown. Her face glowed under the moonlight. He sat beside her on the stone bench. "You don't like festivals?" he asked. She looked at the stars. "No, they feel loud." He chuckled. "And yet here I am, loud in your silence." She turned to him. "You are not loud, Edward. You are kind." His heart skipped. She had called him Edward. It was the first time. He was falling, deep quietly, helplessly. One night, she was standing in the courtyard, barefoot on the cold marble floor. Her gown fluttered in the wind, her arms folded. Edward walked toward her. "You'll catch a chill," he whispered. "I like the wind, but I like your health." She looked up at him. "Why do you care?" He touched her cheek slowly, gently. "Because every breath you take feels like mine." She didn't move. He stepped closer. His lips brushed against her forehead. For a moment, she closed her eyes. She could hear his heartbeat. It was real. Later that night, she sat in her chamber, a small mirror in her hand. A letter from her past hidden under the pillow. And the dagger, still strapped to her leg, but she didn't touch it. Not tonight. Her heart felt strange, warm, dangerous. Love was growing, slowly, like a storm forming beyond the horizon. And then the night came. The moonlight poured gently through the grand palace windows. Soft silence wrapped every hallway in velvet shadows. The girl walked with light feet, her golden anklets barely making a sound. Her silk gown brushed the polished floor as she moved swiftly through the empty corridor. She had waited for this night, for the perfect time. King Edward had gone to the royal court an hour ago. She knew he wouldn't return soon. She had heard the guards say he was with his ministers. Now was her chance. Her heart thudded in her chest. Her steps stopped in front of a heavy wooden door, the king's secret chamber. She looked around. No one. She slowly pushed the door open. It creaked faintly. The room smelled of old books, burning candles, and leather. Maps hung on the walls. Gold seals. Ancient weapons. Scrolls tied with red ribbons. She stepped inside. A large table stood in the middle. On it were rolled parchments and detailed maps of the palace, of the nearby kingdoms, and of hidden paths. She moved toward the table, her fingers trembling slightly. She knew what she was looking for. A secret passage, an entry no one should know. Her eyes scanned the parchments. She opened a few, lifted one, and there it was. A small, yellowed map. Faded, but clear. A path that led behind the palace. She carefully rolled it, slipping it into her right palm, closing her fist tightly. Just as she turned to leave, the door opened. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. It was King Edward. He stood tall at the door, the candlelight casting his shadow long behind him. His eyes met hers. The map hidden in her hand now felt like fire. He looked surprised. "You?" he said softly, stepping inside. "What are you doing here, in my private chamber?" Her throat went dry. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She looked at him, and then quickly away. I was looking for you," she said, her voice low, trying not to tremble. "You weren't in your room. I asked a soldier. He said I might find you here." There was a long pause. Edward took a step closer. His eyes weren't angry. They were calm, warm, curious. "You came to find me?" he asked again, his voice gentler this time. She nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, Your Grace." His expression softened. Something flickered in his eyes. His gaze slowly moved over her face, her eyes, the way her hair curled over her shoulders. He was enchanted. "I didn't expect you to come all this way," he said, smiling now. "But I'm glad you did." She let out a quiet breath of relief. She had been caught, but not truly seen. The map remained pressed in her palm, hidden. He reached out his hand toward her. She hesitated, then placed her free hand in his. Their fingers touched. "Come," he whispered. "This room holds too many secrets. Let me show you something better." He walked with her, hand in hand, out of the chamber. The corridor was still silent. Only the moonlight followed them. But her mind was still inside that room. She had what she needed. The map of the secret path behind the palace. The one only royals knew. The path no one ever guarded. It was her mission. Her fate. She was never supposed to fall in love. But his smile, his eyes, the softness in his voice. Why did it shake her heart? Outside in the corridor, he turned to her again. "I'm lucky," he said gently. "You're here, in my life. You brought something I didn't know I needed." She lowered her eyes. Her heart ached. "Your Grace," she said softly, not knowing what else to say. He leaned closer, brushing a lock of her hair behind her ear. "I don't know who you were before," he whispered, "but I know what you are now. Mine." She looked up at him, eyes shining. He bent down and kissed her forehead, and she smiled, not because of the mission, but despite it. As they walked back to her room, his hand still holding hers, the rolled map remained in her closed fist. A silent promise, a coming storm, but tonight, he saw only beauty in her eyes, and she saw a man who had unknowingly given her something dangerous, his trust. She would complete what she was sent for. She had no choice. But why was her heart so heavy? Why did the warmth of his touch not feel like victory? In the quiet of the night, as they parted outside her chamber, he gently kissed her hand. "Sleep well," he whispered, "and dream of me." She nodded, stepping inside, and closed the door softly behind her. Alone now, she leaned her back against the door, opened her palm, stared at the old map in her hand, and then slowly pressed it to her chest. A tear slipped down her cheek. She had entered his world as a shadow, but now she was caught in his light, and light could burn. The wind outside howled like a warning. She sat near the window in her secret chamber, her fingers trembling as they unfolded a small piece of parchment someone had slipped beneath her door. It bore no seal, no name, just a few words written in the familiar code of her homeland. Her eyes froze on the message. "The map has been received. Tonight is the night. The king must fall by your hands. Our army will take the palace. You have no choice. Do not fail." She stared at the words. Time stilled. A deep weight pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She clutched the paper, her heart pounding. Suddenly, a strange ache twisted in her belly. She dropped the letter and placed a hand over her stomach. The air left her lungs as the realization struck her. No, it couldn't be. But deep inside she knew. She was pregnant. His child. King Edward's child. Tears welled in her eyes. This couldn't happen. Not tonight. Not like this. That evening, King Edward sat alone in the royal study. His cloak was draped over the velvet chair. A fire crackled softly nearby. He heard the door creak and looked up. She entered. He smiled the moment he saw her. "There you are," he said softly, his voice tender. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me." She forced a smile and walked toward him, her steps slow. Her heart screamed with every beat. She sat beside him, leaning gently against his shoulder. The warmth of his body, the calm in his breath, it was all too real, too human, too impossible to destroy. Midnight struck. The palace was silent. All slept peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the stone walls. She sat on the bed beside the sleeping king, her hands cold, her heart torn. The dagger rested beneath her pillow. She whispered, "Forgive me." Her fingers reached for the blade. But before she could move, chaos erupted outside. Shouts, metal clashing, a scream. The king stirred. "What's happening?" Before she could answer, the door burst open. A man entered, tall and cloaked in shadows. His eyes glittered with triumph. "So?" He laughed coldly. "You didn't do it. You were too weak." The king rose, confused and alarmed. "Who are you?" The man ignored him and looked straight at the girl. "You were sent to end him. That was your mission." The king looked at her, stunned. What is he talking about? She stepped back, unable to speak. "You see," the man sneered, "this beautiful girl is our spy, sent to destroy your kingdom from within." The king's eyes filled with betrayal. Is this true?" Tears streamed down her face. Her lips trembled. The man lunged forward to strike the king, but she moved faster. With a cry, she drew the dagger and stabbed the traitor straight in the chest. He fell, eyes wide in shock. The king looked at her, stunned. She gasped, "I couldn't do it. I couldn't hurt you." The king's voice was hoarse. "Why?" "Because I love you." He didn't answer. He grabbed his sword and together they ran from the room. The palace was under attack. Shadows crept through every hall. Foreign soldiers poured in through secret doors. But the king knew his castle. He moved like lightning, guiding her down hidden passages. He called upon his secret guards, the ones he trusted with his life. The halls echoed with battle cries. Blood was shed, walls trembled. But the king's sword did not rest. And she fought by his side, fearless, wild, driven by guilt and love. She protected him as much as he protected her. Together they turned the tide. By dawn, the invaders lay dead or bound. The rebellion had failed. The palace stood bruised but not broken. In the throne room, the king stood tall, his shirt stained with blood, a gash on his shoulder. She stood beside him, her hands trembling but her gaze strong. Guards dragged in the last of the attackers, their leader. The man spat on the ground, glaring at her. "You traitor!" he shouted. "You filthy woman! You betrayed your people for a king's bed. You should die for what you've done." He lunged toward her, but before he could touch her, the king struck him down with a single blow of his sword. The hall fell silent. The king turned to her slowly. She stood still. Tears fell down her cheeks. She didn't move when he stepped toward her. "I won't fight," she whispered. "I know what I did. I know what I was sent to do. If you wish to punish me, I'll accept it." She closed her eyes. He said nothing for a moment. Then he raised her own dagger to her neck. Her breath caught, but instead of pressing it into her skin, he dropped it. The metal clinked against the marble floor. She opened her eyes. He cupped her face gently, lovingly. "You are the mother of my child," he whispered. "You are my wife, my queen." Her heart broke. She collapsed into his arms, and for the first time in her life, she truly cried. Days passed. The royal court was stunned when Queen Margaret, the king's lawful wife, packed her belongings and left the palace. Her rage had boiled over. The betrayal she felt was not only of love, but of power. She had no child to offer, no heart left to give. She was gone, and in her place, the mysterious desert girl, once a spy, now stood beside the king, crowned in gold and silks, bearing his heir. The people whispered of her past, but they also saw her bravery. They saw how she saved the king, and in time they accepted her. One morning, in the king's garden, she sat under a tree, the sun shining on her glowing face. He knelt beside her, one hand on her rounded belly. "You gave me more than a kingdom," he whispered. "You gave me something I never thought I'd have." "A family," she said softly. Their fingers laced together. In the distance, the palace bells rang, a sound of peace. For now the war was over, and love had won.